G'day, welcome back to the channel. Look, I was thinking the other night that with all the great fresh work kits out there, is it really worth doing kit and kilo kits or kits and bits in 2025? Look, kit beers and kit and kilo, look, it's got a bad rap over time, mostly because of how it used to be and probably still is, depending on where you shop. Look, back in the 90s, kit and kilo brewing was how a lot of us got started, me included. But some of you will remember the tins stacked at Big W. For my US friends, think Walmart, but with fewer choices and no guns counter. And commonly, not much care for the storage. Those cans would sit for months under the fluoro lights. Getting a fresh tin that hadn't been cooked on the shelf or in some back storeroom was nearly impossible. So let's talk about the old days a bit more. There were brands like Homebrew. Now that was really cheap, it was everywhere, but it was usually stale. Homebrew shops also had their quirks. Hops that were literally brown. I didn't realise they were actually green until I stopped shopping where I was and went to a proper homebrew shop. Look, they used to have yeast kept next to the bungs and caps and airlocks on the shelf, and they were often as warm as toast. Staff would proudly tell you to buy CSR cane sugar because it was heaps better quality than the supermarket's home brand. Things like brew boosters and malt, they were seen as optional extras and not essential. Also, fermentation temperature control, that wasn't a thing. If it was hot, you were told, don't worry about it. It'll just finish quicker and you can bottle it sooner. If you wanted a temperature controlled fridge, you had to wire up your own STC 1000. And oxygen exposure. No one cared. People bulk primed in secondary buckets and splashed away to their heart's content, not even giving it a quick second thought. So the quick takeaway, I guess, was it was rough, it was simple, but those cheap kits, it hooked a whole generation of homebrewers, myself included. Back then, education wasn't really a thing either. Brewing books were almost non-existent. My first book was Charlie Papazian's New Complete Joy of Homebrew. I loved it so much that I had to go out and buy the 4th edition just for nostalgia. The internet wasn't a thing. You were basically on your own. Look, everyone's got a horror story from back in the day, from exploding bottles to cidery, thin, overcarbonated or flat beer with every off flavour known to man. I think we even invented a few back in the day. So fast forward to today. Coopers, it's still a gateway and really, it's still everywhere. But the good old Coopers kits, and I've got a couple here, they're not your only option. We've got things like Black Rock from New Zealand. Now their range is getting bigger every day, and of course there's good old Morgans. I like them because they're Australian, and specifically I picked up this old style kit because when my dad was alive, the old man used to brew it with this kit over and over again, and the beer he produced was nothing short of fantastic. I'll even share the recipe with you. He shared it with me, admittedly begrudgingly, over a beer one night. But Dad, you're gone now, and I think everyone needs to see just how good this was. Anyway, your local homebrew stock may even have their own brand. Mine does. Homebrewers Warehouse, they do the Diamondback range. Big shout out to Greg and the team there at Homebrewers Warehouse. Look, they've been perfecting these concentrates for absolute years. They started even before I started homebrewing. And look, I haven't done one that I didn't like. They also do complete beer packs. Now these come with proper malt booster and dextrose for balance, and they even have dry hops. And believe it or not, they're not kept on the shelf, they're in the fridge. They're nothing like the old kit and kilo. They're full beer packs. They're pretty much grab and go. Now, a quick note for my US friends. Here in Australia and New Zealand, homebrewing really grew out of hopped tin kits like, you know, the Blackrock and the Coopers. In the States, my understanding is it went a little bit differently. Most homebrewers there buy unhopped liquid malt extract and boil it up on the stovetop, and obviously add their hops separately. I think it's the same idea, just a different starting point. You know, different road, same destination, and we're after the same thing in the end, which is a fridge full of beer. And freshness matters no matter where you are. Kits that are stored properly at home brew shops are the way to go. Look, their hops are vacuum sealed and they're kept cold, and more importantly, their yeast's fresh. And here's another thing that gets overlooked. Once you leave the brew shop with your kit or your concentrate, don't just chuck it in the boot and wander around the shops with your significant other doing important things like looking at shoes and handbags. That tin sitting in a hot car, it's not going to do it any favours at all. So, if you're not brewing with it straight away, store it someplace cool. Even just whack the whole tin in the fridge. If you don't want to use it straight away, it won't hurt it, and it'll just keep it fresh until you're ready to brew. The only thing I'd caution you with is don't stick the brew enhancer in the fridge, because condensation can make it clump and you'll end up with just a solid 1 kilo block of stuff that you've got to try and dissolve. So, brewing a great kit beer starts before you even grab your mixing spoon or your fermenter, and it starts at the brew shop, and here's why. So, these kits, there's a little dirty secret that they won't tell you at the brew shops, but a good home brew shop will. Most concentrate kits have a shelf life of about 2 years from the date of packaging. So you might see one that says it expires, or it's best before August 2026. And you think to yourself, it's August 25? That's a whole year away. But here's the catch. From the moment that malt is put in a tin, no matter what brand it is, the Maillard reaction kicks in. And that's the same reaction that browns your toast, it roasts coffee, and it gives you snag that lovely flavour at Bunnings. Over time, that concentrate darkens. So a Pilsner kit that has 18 months left before its best before date will pour lighter than one with only 12 months left. You can't do anything about it, it's just the way it is. And supermarket storage in non-air conditioned storerooms with the heat cycles, you know, warming up and cooling down like a yo-yo, all that does is just darken the malt and speed things up. Suddenly your crisp lager looks more like a pale amber. So before you buy that can of concentrate, I'd encourage you to flip it up and check the best before date on the bottom of the can. So the fresher kits, the better. Look for places that have a high turnover of stock, and if it's within 6 months, walk away, go and pick up a fresher kit. Oh, and if you order these online, try and spring for the express post so that they're not sitting around in the back of a truck untemperature controlled for too long. So there's probably an exception to this, and that is with darker beers. So, you know, your stouts, porters, Irish reds. Look, you might not notice the colour shift, but I can tell you, you'll definitely notice the flavour. And here's another problem. It's the yeast itself. You know, that little packet of yeast that sits underneath the lid, dry yeast, it loses its viability with age. So good brew shops store their yeast in the fridge, not just the liquid yeast, but the dry yeast as well. Why is that? Because cold storage keeps it fresher longer. If your kit yeast is a year old and it's been sitting warm on a supermarket shelf, that yeast sachet is already struggling. That means you'll end up with what used to happen, which was sluggish starts off flavours, and worst of all, no fermentation at all. So if you've got an older can with the included yeast and you've got a batch that's just finished, as long as it's sort of the same style of beer, you can quite often get good results for harvesting some of that yeast from the first batch. Look, I've made a video on how to harvest yeast and I'll link to it up here somewhere. Give that a watch. Now, back in the day, it was always use yourself a kilo of white sugar. Yeah, you can still do that. But the beer, I guarantee you, will most likely be the poster child for disappointment. So let's talk about sugars. So, brewing sugars, the two most common you'll come across is dextrose, and that's yeast's best mate. It's 100% fermentable, it boosts alcohol, and it leaves nothing behind. It's perfect for priming sugar. Maltodextrin, that's the opposite. It's not fermentable, it adds body and mouthfeel, it improves head retention, and it doesn't taste sweet. So I guess the takeaway in 2 lines is use dextrose if you want alcohol without changing the flavour, and use maltodextrin in your beers if they taste thin or watery. Better yet, buy your brewing sugars in bulk and don't get caught in the trap of buying tiny boxes of brew enhancer because you're just paying extra for the packaging. But hey, you can't compete with these for good old convenience. So if you want better kit beers, here's the cheat sheet. Swap your sugar for dry or liquid malt. Use boosters with dextrose or maltodextrin. Add hops as a tea or a whirlpool or a dry hop. Upgrade your sachet of yeast that comes with a kit. A sachet of US-05 or Nottingham works absolute wonders. And temperature control is plug and play nowadays, and Inkbird makes it easy for anybody. You just unpack it and you're up and going. No need to burn your house down trying to wire your own STC 1000. So, is kit and kilo worth it in 2025? I'd definitely say yes if you do it smart. If you stick to cheap supermarket kits and table sugar, especially if those kits have been mishandled, you'll get the same dodgy, thin beer with all the off flavours that we remember from the 1990s. Grab fresh kits from a proper brew shop, use malt boosters, throw in hops, and keep it cool until you're ready to brew with it. I almost guarantee you, if you nail your sanitation, you'll brew a beer that you'll be proud to share. Look, it's amazing how far homebrewing's come since the days of brown hops and cooked tins at Big W. Look, we'll be brewing some of these kits on the channel soon, so make sure you stick around for that. Look, cheers for watching. Look, if this video has helped you out, do us a favour and give us a thumbs up. It really helps the channel out and lets YouTube know that this video is worth a watch. Look, if you've already subscribed, thanks very much for the support. You're an absolute legend. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, ring the little bell icon so you don't miss out when I've got a new video for you and it drops. More importantly, you'll be part of the Doghouse crew. I reckon we can crack 1,000 subs by Christmas. Let me know in the comments which one of these kits we're going to brew first. I've got a unique recipe for each one of them. And these kits that I've brewed these recipes a number of times over the years and I've tweaked them and they all come up a treat. If you want to see me pimp out a Cooper's brew kit already with a recipe that I developed, I've got a video on that and I'm drinking that one now. I've only saved a few litres in a mini keg and this is probably the last one. So sadly, I need to pull my finger out and brew that again. Look, check out the video, I'll link it up here. Look, I'll catch you on the next one. Till then, remember, life's too short to drink dodgy beers or to pick up a nearly expired kit. Remember to flip it over and look at the best before date on the bottom of the can, and that way you won't get caught out with an amber pilsner. I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers. Oh yeah.